What happens when a young black boy, dismissed and belittled by his racist math teacher, decides to stand up and prove his worth? Rashad Tate, quiet but brilliant, is about to face the ultimate test in front of a packed, all-white crowd, one that includes the teacher who doubted him the most. Will he buckle under the immense pressure, or will he rise to the occasion and deliver a performance that no one will ever forget? And how will Mr. Chase react when the truth about Rashad's genius is laid bare? Stay with us as we reveal the full story. It was the very first day of school at Magnolia Hills Academy, a prestigious private school nestled in an affluent Georgia suburb. Room 204, though, was just like any other classroom, except for the glaring fact that it was entirely made up of white students. 12-year-old Rashad Tate stood frozen at the door, his backpack strapped tightly, and his dark brown eyes nervously scanning the room. The teacher, Mr. Vernon Chase, gestured for him to come forward. Rashad's mother had recently transferred him from their old school in Atlanta to Magnolia Hills, hoping for better opportunities. But right away, Rashad felt out of place. He was the only black student surrounded by a sea of unfamiliar faces. "Class," Mr. Chase announced in a clipped tone. "This is Rashad Tate. He'll be joining us this year. Rashad, take a seat in the back." Rashad gave a small nod, and as he made his way to the empty desk by the window, the whispers began immediately. "Is he on a scholarship? Probably can't even afford lunch here. Why'd they even let him in?" But Mr. Chase didn't address the murmurs. Instead, he adjusted his glasses, turned to the chalkboard, and started scribbling a complex equation. From the very beginning, it was clear to Rashad that Mr. Chase didn't like him. It wasn't anything obvious, no harsh words or blatant insults, but the subtlety was just as cutting. When Rashad raised his hand, Mr. Chase would ignore him and call on someone else. When Rashad asked a question, Mr. Chase would sigh loudly, as if annoyed. And whenever Rashad turned in his work, it always came back covered in scathing critiques, even when Rashad knew he had done it right. One afternoon, during a particularly tough lesson on quadratic equations, Rashad's hand shot up. "Yes, Rashad," Mr. Chase said, barely hiding his irritation. "I think you made a mistake in step 3, Rashad spoke up cautiously. The classroom fell silent. Mr. Chase turned toward the board, his face unreadable. "And what makes you think that?" he asked, his voice cold. "Well," Rashad started, "if you divide by 2x here, it cancels out the—" "That's enough," Mr. Chase snapped, his patience running thin. "Let's not pretend you know more than the teachers." The class burst into muffled laughter, and Rashad sank deeper into his seat, his face burning. He clenched his fists under the desk, determined not to let the tears come. But despite the humiliation, Rashad refused to give up. Numbers were his escape, his sanctuary. At home, he spent hours solving complex equations in his notebook, often tackling problems far beyond his grade level. His mother, a single parent and a former math teacher, had always nurtured his love for mathematics. "You've got a gift, Rashad," she would tell him. "Don't let anyone dim your light." One evening, as Rashad sat at the kitchen table, furrowing his brow over his homework, his mother noticed his frustration. "Everything okay?" she asked gently. "It's Mr. Chase," Rashad admitted. "He acts like I don't belong in his class." His mother's face hardened with determination. "You don't have to prove anything to him, Rashad. Just keep doing your best. The truth always comes out." The next week, Magnolia Hills announced the upcoming Math Leap competition, a prestigious event where students would compete against schools in the district. Mr. Chase, the faculty advisor for the team, stood before the class, clipboard in hand. "Only the top 5 students will make the team," he said, his tone indifferent. "If you're interested, sign up after class." Rashad hesitated. He knew he was good at math, but he also knew Mr. Chase didn't want him on the team. Still, he couldn't let fear hold him back. As soon as the bell rang, Rashad approached Mr. Chase's desk. "I'd like to try out," Rashad said, his voice firm. Mr. Chase raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "Are you sure about that?" "Yes," Rashad replied, unwavering. Mr. Chase smirked. "All right, Tate. Let's see what you've got." On the day of the tryouts, Rashad was ready. He'd spent countless hours studying, memorizing formulas, and practicing mental math. The test was grueling, but Rashad breezed through it, his mind sharp and focused. When the results were posted, his name was at the top of the list. Mr. Chase, though clearly displeased, couldn't argue with the numbers. Rashad had made the team. The Math Leap competition took place in a grand auditorium filled with students, parents, and teachers. Magnolia Hills was facing off against their biggest rivals, Crestview Academy. As the final round began, the tension was palpable. The last question was a complex equation that stumped even the judges. One by one, the Crestview team members attempted to solve it and failed. Then it was Rashad's turn. His heart pounded in his chest as he stepped up to the board. The room fell silent as he worked through the problem, his mind racing with each step. After what felt like an eternity, he put the chalk down and stepped back. The judge examined his work, nodding in approval. The crowd erupted into cheers, but Rashad's eyes were on Mr. Chase. For the first time, the teacher looked genuinely stunned. Back at school, Rashad was a hero. His classmates, who had once mocked him, now looked at him with admiration. But the biggest surprise came from Mr. Chase. After class one day, Mr. Chase called Rashad to his desk. "I owe you an apology," he said, his voice softer than ever. "I underestimated you, and I was wrong." Rashad didn't know how to respond. He simply nodded and walked away, feeling a sense of closure. Rashad's victory wasn't just about winning a competition, it was about breaking barriers and challenging stereotypes. He proved that with talent, determination, and an unshakable belief in himself, anyone could rise above prejudice and doubt. What are your thoughts on this story? Share them in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more updates on this story and many more to come. Music